Good morning. My name is Cindy Gianfrancesco, and I am the owner of Gleaner Gardens. Welcome. I live in the town of Scituate, and I am a member of the Scituate Land Trust and Conservation Commission. I'm also a member of the Gentian Garden Club. I was trained as a Master Gardener about 20 years ago, and one of the things we learned in Master Gardeners was how to protect water on your properties. This includes well water, surface water, storm water, and of course streams, lakes, and ponds that might be in the area. So today we're going to be walking around our property and taking a look at those things which could be impacted and how we're trying to make sure that by the way that we garden and the way that we manage our property, that those things are not impacted. When my husband and I found our property over 20 years ago, we had no idea what a gem we had discovered. This property was previously owned by George Howarth, who loved rhododendrons and planted, as far as we can tell, close to 300 different varieties of rhododendrons. We have one of the largest private rhododendron collections in New England, and every spring this is what it looks like. It's just fabulous. This is where the well is located for our home. As you can see, the well is in a concrete enclosure with a concrete cap. It is a drilled well. It's about 160 feet deep, and there's a pump in it that pumps water up and into the house. One of the things that we try to do is keep vegetation clear from around the well so that we can inspect it on a regular basis. As I can see, we need to come out here and do a little bit more work on that and get some of these plants out from around it. But it's important to be able to inspect your well visually on a periodic basis to be sure that there's no damage to it, that animals aren't trying to get into it. And also, one of the things that we try to do is be sure that any activities that are taking place on the property are not close enough to the well that could cause contamination. Like many homeowners, we like to feed the birds. It's always a pleasure to watch the different birds come and go from the feeder. We're at the point where we're about ready to take this down. It's late spring and the birds have plenty of food elsewhere in the yard, so I won't keep it up all summer. But one of the things that we try to make sure of is that the bird feeder is a distance from the well, because birds can create bacteria from their droppings, and we want to be sure that we don't have any possible chance of those droppings contaminating our well. So our feeder is about 40 feet away from our well, and that's about as close as we would want to keep it. So one thing that we try to do with the feeder every year after we're done feeding the birds, as I said, in the late spring, we'll take down the feeder and we'll clean up the area underneath the bird feeder, because there's a real accumulation of seeds and droppings, and this can be an area where bacteria can grow, so we want to make sure we clean that up and keep it as sanitary as possible. Kitchen compost bin. This is the compost bin where we dispose of all the vegetative waste that comes out of our kitchen. We put it in a place where we know that it's far enough distance from our well that you never know. You've got a mixture of organisms that are working their way in there to break down the vegetative material. So we want to be sure that, again, the compost bin is at least 50 feet away from our well. This is our driveway where we park our cars. As you can see, it's not an asphalt driveway. We have decided that we don't want any or the least amount of impermeable surfaces on our property, so we put in a gravel driveway where the water permeates into the ground. Another thing that we've also tried to do on our property is to be sure that none of the stormwater runoff from the property flows out to the street where it could get into a storm drain and eventually into the Scituate Reservoir. So we try to control all of the stormwater on our property, right on our property, by allowing it to infiltrate, and that way we're sure that it couldn't potentially carry any contaminants into the stormwater and into the reservoir. Another thing that we've done on our property is be sure that our downspouts from our roof drains do not drain into the driveway or out onto the street, and that they percolate into the ground. In the backyard here, what we've done is we've connected our roof drains to a dry well. So as you can see here, the roof drain comes down and goes into a pipe in the ground. This pipe goes underground to a dry well that's filled with rocks. So we've got several downspouts in the backyard here that are tied into that dry well. Another thing that we've done is extend our downspouts out into the garden, so they drain close to the house, where we could end up getting water in the basement during heavy rains, or they also don't flow onto any hardscape area where they might be able to travel off of the property. So all of our downspouts drain into gardens where it waters the plants. When we first moved to the property, we had a cesspool on the property. And as you may or may not realize, cesspools are being phased out and to be replaced with a conventional septic system. So about 10 years ago, we went ahead and we did that. So septic system, this is where our septic tank is. This is where the water initially collects from the house, and then from here it drains out to a leach field. One of the things that we have to remember to do every year, there's a screen in this septic tank that needs to be rinsed out every year. So every year we got to take the cover off and get the screen out and just rinse it off so that it doesn't get clogged. If it does get clogged, then we could end up with backup in the house. This is where the leach field for our septic system is. When we had this installed, we again tried to make sure that it was at least 100 feet away from our well, which it is. This is also our dog pen area. So when we're not home, the dog is in this area, and again, this area we've tried to make sure is a distance enough away from the well that we can't have any potential. Vegetable garden. I've grown vegetables since I was a teenager. I've always had a vegetable garden. And along with everything else in the yard, we try to be sure that we are being conscientious of all the activities that take place here. So we tend to not use pesticides unless they're organic pesticides. All fertilizers that we use are organic fertilizers, and we always try to keep the use of those things to a minimum just to be sure that we're not impacting groundwater. One of the things that we don't pay particular attention to in our yard is the lawn. As you can see, we've just got small paths that run in between the rhododendrons and garden beds, and we like it that way. We do not use pesticides. We don't use herbicides unless it's absolutely necessary. And if we fertilize, we always use organic fertilizers. We lime every year because that's not going to harm anything. But we try to keep our lawn as natural as possible without using a lot of chemicals on it. So one of the projects we're working on is hooking up this 55-gallon drum for a rain barrel. We were given the drum from someone who assured us that it was clean and had never had any hazardous materials in it. And what we did was we drilled a hole in the bottom down here and we installed a spigot. So we're going to put this under one of the downspouts so that the downspout drains right into one of these holes, and then we will have an instant source of water every time it rains. We'll hook up a hose to the spigot at the bottom and be able to water plants with it. This is the work area for our property. This is where we store our lawnmower, the snow blower, chainsaws, any gasoline-powered equipment is stored in this shed. And this shed and this work area is on the complete opposite side of the house as where our well is. This way we're sure that, again, we're not causing any potential impact to the well. My husband is pretty good at keeping all of our equipment well maintained so that we're sure it's running properly, that nothing is leaking. We're also very careful when adding gasoline to any pieces of equipment that gasoline doesn't spill. One of the things that I learned when I worked at the Department of Environmental Management, I was sampling a lot of wells around the state, and it was amazing the amount of gasoline contamination that we were finding in people's wells. It was caused by self-contamination, because every time they filled the lawnmower, they dropped a few drops of gasoline on the ground, and eventually it made it into the well. So you really need to be sure that this kind of activity takes place far enough away from the well. If for some reason that's just not possible, then my recommendation is that you always put a piece of cardboard under the piece of equipment that you're adding gasoline to. That way the gasoline, if you spill any, will drip onto the cardboard and you can just leave it out to evaporate and it won't infiltrate into the ground. This is the compost area where all of our yard waste is composted. Again, we try to make sure that it's far enough away from the well. It's on the complete opposite side of the property so that it couldn't have potentially any impact to the well. It also is far enough away from any surface water bodies that may be in the area. We don't have any surface water on this particular property, but if there were, we would want to be sure that this compost area was at least 100 feet away from any surface water. All of the yard waste that we collect, we dump into this pile. And as you can see, we have been mining compost recently. After a few years, it breaks down and makes absolutely beautiful soil that we use to amend our vegetable garden with. This concludes our tour for today. We're very glad that you could join us here at Gleaner Gardens and hope you found the information useful. Stay safe and happy gardening.